Hello, everyone. Welcome to my studio at the bottom of my garden at home. Just very briefly, I've been mentioning that Varsha and myself are considering putting on um, a s- an art class focusing solely on semi-abstract to abstraction. So it's quite an involved process for the reasons I'm going to try and briefly demonstrate here this morning. So what do we mean by semi-abstract to abstraction? So if I just give you some brief examples just to show you, bear with me. Here we go. They come up in a moment. Okay, then. So this is a book which is quite a useful book showing your process how you can work semi-abstract. I know the title says realistic abstract, but it means the same thing. So let's just have a look at some examples then in this book. So here's a figurative image here of a lady. The dress that she's wearing is quite abstract, isn't it? So this gives you a flavor of what we mean by semi-abstract. In other words, we can recognize what's within the subject, but not being photographic about it or being non-representational. So here's one example. This one again, so if we look at this can be termed semi-abstract because we do have to stop and think about what's being depicted in this picture. And as we can now make out, it's both, either on a beach or I suspect they're on a beach. So it's a simple one. But again, this is semi-abstract because a lot of the information is missing. Let's go to another one. So here we have again another semi-abstract because again we can recognize certain elements within the subject. Yes, chickens behind the wire mesh. Okay, as we can see here, that's what the artist is also depicting. But again, and it doesn't come instantly to you. You've got to stop and think about it and analyze the image and to make out what's being represented. So here's another example of semi-abstraction. Again, here, there's a lot of clues again telling us that this is probably a Middle Eastern scene. Um, we can see the buildings in the distance there, typical of what you might find in around the Mediterranean. If we then zoom in, of course, closer to here, that is almost abstraction, isn't it? Because we cannot make out what's happening here. But within that, there is certain clues as the buildings here, telling us that it's a street scene. But as I just mentioned, getting in closer and closer to it, that becomes virtually abstract. And here's another example. And finally, I think this one here again. So we can make this one out as well. But if we zoom in closer on it, there's a lot of abstract brushstrokes here taking place. But when we zoom out, of course, and see it in its entirety, then, of course, we can make out what the subject is. And it's of a building set in, it could be a park or in some landscape. So here's another example. And finally, this one. This is probably going towards more abstraction than semi-abstraction, but I think even here we can make out, if we get in closer, buildings. Okay, so there's buildings there. So again, this could be termed on the borderline between semi-abstraction and full abstraction. Then we come then to some more examples, but no, of course, these are abstract paintings. Okay, let's have a look then. So this one here is total abstraction. In other words, we can't put any meaning to it. And of course, the artist's intention here could be many. That's why there are no rules as such. It's down to what it is you're trying to express. It could represent the landscape. It could represent many, many things. And it's for you to decipher what you think this painting contains. It could well be that the artist doesn't want to put a title on it anyway. In other words, you come and look at this painting and you walk away with your own interpretation as to what it represents. It could represent a landscape. The artist might be concentrating on color. The artist might also be concentrating on you walking away with emotional effect, having some emotional effect upon you. So it can be a number of things that the artist is trying to express, other than in a very representational way. Here's another example here. And this is a landscape. The artist was out in the landscape, and it was a lady artist. She did a brief sketch. She took that back to her studio and she worked this further sketch up, okay? So even this is quite abstract. I've just explained to you what it represents, and you could probably guess that without me having to do that. Then she took it a stage further, as in the next slide. Here we go. And she came up with this finished composition here, based on that initial drawing that she did out in the landscape. So this is abstraction. Yes, we could make out trees possibly here, but beyond that, it's difficult to make out what else is happening. So again, the artist isn't concerned with the representation it's her conveying how she sees it. Let's look at another one. This one here is, again, more abstract, isn't it? What's being depicted here? You could make all sorts of guesses. I mean, my initial reaction to this is it could be a sky at the top end of the canvas. And what the bottom end of the canvas depicts, I'm not quite sure. But of course, this is abstraction and what's happening here in the center. So to find out more then, let's go to the description or the explanation that the artist gives us. I'm not going to pause on this too much because you can do this at home. But quickly, what she's done here is she has no clear focal point and stark alternation rather between the active and the passive parts. Okay, the active parts is here in the center, the focal part. The passive parts, of course, are at the top of the painting and also at the bottom. She's got a high horizontal, which is somewhere up here. The active part is created by contrast in color and shape, as we see here, size and texture between it, and the larger still parts elsewhere. Still parts, as I mentioned a moment ago, at the top and at the bottom. And then the center part, which is also the focal part, is the active area. The active part in the paintings gives us the focal point, as I've just explained, from where we can further examine the whole. Color repeats and textural accents lead our eye to the center and misspelling here to other parts of the painting to ensure correlation, cohesion, and unity. So that's the way this artist explains this. So that's the end of the share. Okay, welcome back. And now I'm going to go to my canvas or my paper, as it were. Just taking that a step further then. Some of these images, some of you may be familiar with, but here's another example of a semi-abstract painting, a landscape. Okay, there we go. We can make out, there's enough information here telling us what's happening. The sky, tree, possibly a river here and so forth. Semi-abstract. Here's another version here. This one, again, most of you are familiar with. It's a simple subject, and that's the key to it, actually, when you learn to do a new style. As we can see here, the artist is giving enough information to tell us what the subject is. Teacup, a spoon resting in a saucer. But you note here how expressive the artist is being with the paint. Similar story with this one. And of course, in those examples I showed you earlier, we could be using a simple subject such as the teapot and the cup, but I know you're already moaning. If you've done it that many times, that you've been missing the point, actually. I'm not going to use it today, but I could use this image and work on that to create a semi-abstract painting. Instead, I'm going to use this version here. So as I keep saying, got to keep it simple, okay? Before I come to the subject I'm going to use in a moment, the bottles, I'm doing a very quick demonstration just to give you a taste of what's involved. before you come to do your finished painting, it's always best to do a series of preliminary sketches or whatever to arrive at the final point before you commit yourself to the final painting. This is initially a portrait. I was giving some instruction for a portrait class last month. And then very quickly, I just did a little bit of the abstract work on this. So this would be your initial approach before committing yourself to a finished painting. Work through the idea a little bit. Do some sketches until you're happy. And here I was just experimenting with a rubber and just doing a bit more imagining. Just as a brief demonstration as to what you do to a finished piece of work. I would probably work on that a little bit more, if need be, redo the portrait again and try it radically differently. So I'm working out the ideas beforehand and then finally come to. I'm going to keep it simple as I keep mentioning and using the bottle. Yeah. Now, let's assume that I've gone through the various stages that I've just mentioned. And I've come to the finished sketches that were, and now I'm going to commit or finished paint. So I'm going to be using charcoal at the moment so that you can see that here's the bottle, okay? And I'm going to be working semi-abstract. So I might start off obviously with a very representational drawing, as you can see here. And there's various ways I could, of course, put the drawing down here. I could be working a lot looser. I could be working with 2 pencils or whatever. But this is a journey, remember, from working semi-abstraction to abstract. And then the orange here. And there it is. But it's sketched up. I just rubbed the excess charcoal off there in a moment. I'll try to get a detailed drawing here. Put that out of the way so I can refer to it. And to stop the paint lifting of the charcoal, but I've got enough lines there. There's a danger otherwise of the paint lifting charcoal nudging you. I've already prepared the paint, but I keep mentioning keep it simple. So I've squeezed out 2 blues, cerulean blue, ultramarine blue. So I'm going to do this as study in blue if you like. So I've made 2 tonal values here with a cerulean there. Now this is just a taste to remember. So I haven't really carefully worked out my approach. So all I'm going to do is just go for it, make a start and let instinct take over, okay? Because I don't want to spend too much time doing it. I'll start with the bottle at the back. So maybe I go for a lighter blue here. So now my concentration is going on the mark making. I'm referring to the subject in front of me that I'm working from. Okay. But as I'm always impressing upon you, I'm a great believer in following your instinct and spontaneity. So I'm happy with that. Now I come to the bottle in front of me here, the closer one. And for that, I can go for the darker blue, ultramarine blue. So in other words, I'm blocking in. I'm also working semi-abstract. So I'll retain just enough information so that the viewer can make out what's happening. I'm going to go a little bit darker now for the orange. So it's a light value there. There we go. So I blocked it in. Now, over the years, I've learned to trust my judgment, my instinct. It does take practice. So I'm working out what I can do next. Maybe because I've gone dark here, I come darker. No, I come darker on this bottle. It's in the foreground. So now I can put the paint on more thickly and let the paint play a role. Here we go. Maybe I come down this side here on the bottle but we could have the light coming from the left. So once again, and I find, as I'm often mentioning in class, once I make a start, the few brush strokes, then excitement takes over and away you go. I could make that to a label there, couldn't I? And regarding the background, I wasn't going to bother with a background, but here we go. Maybe make it lighter. So as you can see already, we're starting to lose some of the shape of these items. I'm hoping to retain enough information for a viewer to come in or to see this and for them to identify being a bottle, another bottle, and maybe a piece of fruit. So I've been working on this now just for a couple of minutes. And I got to squeeze out a little bit more white. I'll just pause the video for a moment. I've just squeezed out some more white, plus I've just done a few more brush strokes here. I want to keep this as short as I possibly can. So once again, relying on instinct here. I'm not going to take it much further than what I've done here. But now I squeezed out some more white, I could adjust the background a little bit more. I'm not sure I'll leave the background. So I'm going to bring this to a conclusion by adding now some white. Again, putting them where the eye takes me. I'm not really referring to the photograph in front of me or the image. I'm now just trusting my judgment. And I'm also now putting the paint on more thickly, which that is also an expressive way of working. Maybe I'll indicate a label there, a white label. I could be using a palette knife as well. Incidentally, I'm using water-based oils here, but you could be using acrylic if you choose to do some of this work, or indeed watercolor or charcoal or whatever. There's no restrictions onto what medium you use. Now, I'm happy with what I've achieved there, so I'm going to stop the recording in a few moments because I don't want to spend too much of your time watching me. Right, and if I just get them out briefly. So this is intended just to give you some idea of what you can have a go at if you're interested in working semi-abstract and maybe taking it a step further to abstraction. So I won't do any more to this. We're going to start in the weekly classes as from this week, so that you can have a go. And then those of you who are interested, possibly you might want to join the class that Varsha and I are putting together, which will be, I keep saying, working from semi-abstraction to abstraction. The idea is to make it interesting, but also informative and allowing you to do your own research as well in between the classes that we're. So we're trying to keep it as, we're trying to achieve an in-depth rather than just skimming over some of these stuff I introduce you to from time to time. So I'm going to leave it at that, and we can discuss it further in class. Okay, thanks for watching, everyone.